I almost didn't get hired when I applied for a job at my neighborhood bookstore because I was a lesbian. It was 1974, and I was 21 years old. The anti-war activist collective that started the store didn't yet understand where LGBTQ liberation fit into their revolution. But they took a chance on me anyway, and right away I created a gay section and started filling it with all the books I could find. I was hungry for queer stories, and I knew other people would be too. The section grew quickly, so I added a lesbian section and made it 2 sections. Now, anyone who's ever worked in a bookstore will tell you that before long you will get your own regulars. These are folks who come in to tell you what's up in their lives, find out what you're reading, and get personalized advice. It's a bit like being a bartender without the booze. Or a doctor. Your prescription is usually, here, read this book and call me in the morning. My first regular was Melissa. Melissa was not that much younger than me, 16, and a lesbian. She was short with shoulder-length honey brown hair and brown eyes, and she dressed simply in t-shirt and jeans, and she had a kind of fierceness about her. She'd come striding in with a strong walk, back straight, arms at her side. When she told me she was being bullied at school, and worse, her own parents were ashamed of her sexual orientation. They were pressuring her to straighten up her act, literally. She'd come in to see me for support. Well, this is a first for me because I was still a baby lesbian myself. But I told her, homophobia is wrong. And I said, I also had trouble when I came out because even though my mother was a lesbian, she felt the need to stay in the closet, even with me. I gave Melissa Ruby Fruit Jungle to read. That is Rita Mae Brown's classic Bildungsroman about growing up as a lesbian. It has a happy ending, I told her. Well, some weeks went by, and I realized I hadn't seen Melissa for a while. So I checked with someone we both knew, and that's where I learned the terrible news. Melissa took her own life. I was devastated. I couldn't imagine the pain she must have been in. How had I not seen this coming? What had I missed? Processing Melissa's death was my first lesson in what bookselling was. That it wasn't just putting books I loved on the shelves and hoping other people would love them too. That talking to Melissa wasn't extra, it was the job. I knew I couldn't bring her back, but what could I do for the next gay person who came in looking for something they couldn't find anywhere else? I made a promise to myself and Melissa that for as long as I was a bookseller, I would dedicate myself to creating a space where everyone could feel welcome and wanted. A few years later, I became an owner of the store along with another bookseller, and being an owner broadened my perspective of who we served. I knew that the gay community wasn't the only one whose voices were marginalized, so I made a point of being sure we had strong representation of Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, and Pacific Islander voices on our shelves as well. And I also learned something else around then, that sometimes it's our customers, our community, who's actually telling us what they need. For example, for years there was no gay community center or gay hotline. So people would call the store, our store, to find out where the gay bars, the gay community center, gay support groups, and gay-friendly coffee houses were. I would train our staff, even our straight staff, in how to take those calls. And one of my favorite memories of that time was listening to a straight bookseller tell a caller where to find the leather bar. Now, queer folks don't need us to tell them where the bars are anymore, but they definitely appreciate our reading groups and our author events. And I've lost track over the years of how many LGBTQ folks have told me that coming in and browsing our queer section was a rite of passage for them, that it saved them. And parents come in now, too, looking for advice on how they can better support their gay child. Digital can never replace that kind of human interaction. I mean, when was the last time you had coffee with a chat bot who watched your child grow up? At first, I actually thought that my social justice activism was something I was doing outside of the store. It was folk singer-songwriter Holly Near who gave me the term for what we were doing in the store, and that was cultural work. We were cultural workers. And the bookstore is that elusive third place, the place outside of home and work where folks can come together to affirm their own identities and also build empathy for the identities of others. It happens all the time in our store informally, and it especially happens at our reading groups and our author events. It's something that legislative reform, as important as it is, cannot do. It can only support what we do. I've been a bookseller for over 25 years when September 11th, 2001 happened. It was a Tuesday, a horrible, horrible Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, I got busy researching books on the Middle East and Islam and on grief for both adults and kids. And then I started calling in those orders to the publishers in New York. It felt so surreal and intrusive. But I knew people were going to need these books. And then on Thursday, Deepak Chopra's people called. He was stranded in Chicago on book tour because all the flights had been canceled that week. So he had rented a car, and he would now be driving through St. Louis, where he had not been slated to speak originally. Would we like to host him on Saturday morning? The day after tomorrow? Well, there was no email. We hardly had any copies of his books. Social media hadn't been invented yet. But we made a few calls. And on Saturday morning, it seemed like our entire town had turned out to our store. It was so packed that I stepped outside to make more room. And people would come to the door, and I would say, "I'm sorry you can't come in, it's too full." And they would start to cry. So I would say, "Do you see these butts pressed against the door? If you can get past them, you can go in." Somehow, everyone who needed to got inside our store that morning. Deepak Chopra comforted them. He led them in prayer and meditation. I don't think we sold many books at all, but that wasn't the point. It was these people who so gratefully smashed themselves in our store that morning that not only showed me what they needed, but also how much they trusted us to give them what they needed. Fast forward to 2014. In the weeks after Michael Brown was killed, we refined our sections yet again and added anti-racism and activism categories and some new reading groups as well. And at a packed author event one night, a young white man in the audience raised his hand and asked the black author, "What can I do to make a difference? I really want to, but I don't know where to start." To which the young black man seated next to him replied, "You could start by talking to me." You could have heard a pin drop. The answer was so profoundly simple and true. The two exchanged phone numbers and left together, and I don't know what happened after that, but I do know that what happened that night was a moment of real connection. And to me, that was a moment of real change, one author event at a time. Today, it is my staff, who are young enough to be my children, even my grandchildren, who are fielding the needs of our neighbors. And being mostly Gen Z, they have refined their expectations of those neighbors. They don't accept it when they are sometimes the objects of unintentional microaggressions, such as when a bookseller is misgendered, or a white customer can't tell the difference between two very different black booksellers. So after they've had a moment to recover, I remind them that we are a very big tent, to which they suggest a helpful pronoun chart at the counter, to which I suggest that it needs to be a kind, helpful pronoun chart, because everyone needs to feel welcome in our store, even welcome to make mistakes. That's how they'll stay, I say, and they'll discover books they never knew existed. They'll get to experience what an authentically diverse and inclusive space feels like. They might even teach us a thing or two, I say. We need them. But my staff hardly needs that reminder, because they've grown up in a world that elders like me have fought to make possible. And they are the ones who are defining what cultural work looks like today. They also remind me constantly to walk my talk. Now, every night at closing, a bookseller writes up notes of things that happened during the day, and I never go to bed before I've read it. And often there are reports of special encounters with customers, encounters like this one, and I quote, "Today, a lady came in after her final test for Alzheimer's at the hospital, and she said she felt pulled to our store. And although we didn't have any books that were comforting or encouraging on Alzheimer's, she did leave with a stack of books from our Eastern philosophy section after our heartfelt talk. She cried from the encounter and asked consent for a hug. Oh, sweet Jane, we really are changing people's lives sometimes in this special place." So it's now been 51 years, half a century, that I've been doing this cultural work that is so inadequately defined as bookselling. And my staff is carrying that work forward as they develop and deepen their own relationships with their own regulars. And as we together go forward and continue to show up and hold space for this huge, glorious, complicated, messy community, this community that I love, this community for which I am so protective, I like to think and can only hope that Melissa, with her sweet, fierce determination to be part of this community, would be proud. Thank you.